Am I the a-hole for telling my boss about the illegal activity in the office and losing my job? My name is Arlo Turner, and I'm in my early 30s. I've worked at a mid-sized marketing agency in Charlotte, North Carolina for about 3 years now. It's a decent job, nothing too fancy, but it pays the bills, and I like my coworkers for the most part. The company is growing fast, and I was hoping to get promoted soon. I have been showing a lot of initiative lately and have really been building my reputation. Then things started to get weird. I don't know when it exactly started, but one day I started noticing some discrepancies in the office. Little things at first that felt off, but weren't enough to make me go full conspiracy theorist. The first time I really noticed something shady was during a meeting with our CEO, Greg Delano, and our Director of Client Services, Sarah Lamont. It was a simple meeting about new advertising campaigns for our clients. Greg was the type of guy who was always focused on numbers and results, so I expected him to be direct. But that day, something changed. The meeting felt different. Greg was unusually quiet, letting Sarah talk most of the time. But there was something in the way they were exchanging glances. I don't know if it was my gut instinct or just the fact that I've been in enough meetings to recognize when someone is avoiding a question, but I noticed it. Arlo, what do you think about the budget? Greg asked me, snapping me out of my thoughts. It was a simple question, but I was already feeling uneasy. I think it's a bit tight for the goals we're trying to hit, I said, trying to steer the conversation in a professional direction. Greg didn't seem pleased with my answer. He glanced at Sarah and then said something I'll never forget. Well, maybe we need to get a little creative with those numbers. I didn't catch the full meaning right away. Sarah nodded slightly, almost imperceptibly. It was one of those moments where you feel like you're missing something, but it's subtle enough to ignore. The next week, things started getting more suspicious. I got an email from Sarah, the director of client services, one afternoon. The subject line was Arlo Re Financial Adjustments, and I knew immediately something wasn't right. I opened it quickly and scanned the contents. Hey Arlo, I need you to pull a few reports from the last quarter. The numbers need to match up with some new projections. Don't worry about the details right now. Just pull the data and let me know when it's ready. I immediately felt uncomfortable. Why was Sarah asking for data that didn't need to match up with the details? That phrasing alone sent a cold shiver down my spine. But I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to seem paranoid or like a troublemaker. After all, I was just trying to do my job. But the next day, I started hearing rumors from other employees. Kayla, who worked in accounts, told me she overheard Greg and Sarah talking in one of the conference rooms. From what she gathered, they were discussing how to fudge numbers to make their quarterly performance look better. You know, just tweak some figures. Arlo won't know the difference, she heard Sarah say. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to do some digging. I pulled up the reports I had been working on, double-checked the data with our accounting department, and then compared everything to what Sarah had asked me to pull. Sure enough, it was all wrong. The numbers didn't add up. Expenses were being hidden, and revenue was being inflated. It was worse than I could have imagined. This wasn't just a little creative accounting. This was fraudulent activity, plain and simple. I was livid, but at the same time, terrified. My mind was racing. This wasn't something you could just ignore. I had to report it, but I knew if I did, I'd be risking everything. The next day, I decided to confront Sarah. I walked into Sarah's office, feeling my heart pound in my chest. She was sitting behind her desk, typing away at her computer. Hey Sarah, can I talk to you for a sec? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She looked up, her eyes narrowing slightly. Sure. What's up? I closed the door behind me and sat down. I went over the reports you asked me to pull, and there's something I need to ask about, I began. Some of the numbers just don't match up with the data I have. Sarah raised an eyebrow, but before she could say anything, I pushed forward. I compared the revenue and expense numbers with our actual records from accounting, and there's a discrepancy. It looks like someone has been. She cut me off with a sharp laugh. What are you implying, Arlo? You think we're cooking the books or something? I stared at her, trying to remain calm. I don't know what else to think. I'm just saying that something doesn't add up. There was a long, tense silence before she spoke again. Listen to me. I don't know what you think you saw, but you better forget about this, Arlo. Trust me, you don't want to make a big deal out of this. At this point, my gut was telling me that I was deeper than I had imagined, but I didn't back down. I can't ignore this, Sarah. I'll report it if I have to. Her expression turned icy. You do what you think is best, but I wouldn't be so sure about that. If you want to keep your job, you'll drop it. This kind of thing doesn't end well. The words hit me like a ton of bricks. She wasn't even trying to hide it. This was serious. I walked out of her office, feeling a chill run down my spine. That was when I knew I couldn't stay quiet, but I also knew I couldn't handle this on my own. I needed to go to someone higher up, someone who would take me seriously. I didn't waste time. That afternoon, I sent an email to Greg Delano, our CEO, asking if I could meet with him. I didn't give him any details. I just told him I had something important to discuss. He replied almost immediately, asking me to come to his office in an hour. When I walked in, Greg looked up from his desk, his face calm but guarded. Arlo, what's going on? I sat down, my hands shaking slightly. Greg, I need to tell you something about the numbers. I've been looking into some discrepancies, and I believe there's some illegal activity going on in the office. Greg didn't react immediately. He just sat there, staring at me, his expression unreadable. I've seen the reports, I continued. Someone is manipulating the financial data, making it look like we're hitting targets when we're not. And I have the proof. I slid the documents I had gathered over to him. I can't just ignore this. It's illegal, and it could get the company into serious trouble. Greg's eyes flickered to the papers and then back to me. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he stood up, walked over to the window, and stared out for what felt like an eternity. Arlo, he said quietly, this isn't just about the numbers. This is bigger than you think. At that moment, I realized I had just stepped into something I couldn't fully comprehend, something that could ruin everything. The next few days were a blur. Greg didn't fire me immediately, but he started pulling away from me. I noticed that Sarah had become more aggressive in her interactions with me. People in the office started whispering. I felt like I was being watched. Then it happened. I got called into HR. They told me that due to my unprofessional behavior and lack of team collaboration, they had to let me go. There were no specific details, no real reasons. I had already suspected this would happen, but the way they handled it made me feel like I had been completely betrayed. So here I am without a job, with a ruined reputation, and no idea what to do next. I'm wondering if I was wrong to go to Greg. Should I have kept my mouth shut? I'm looking for advice because I'm genuinely lost right now. Did I do the right thing, or am I the asshole for blowing the whistle and losing my job over it?